Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good night, good morning, good evening. Namaste, all of you. I have to make all of these greetings because you come from different parts of the world, and we are always delighted to have you. Um, we know you have taken the sacrifice and the time to be here. The COVID pandemic is still rampant all over the world and in Trinidad as well. So the safest place to be is at home. Remember to wash your hands regularly and sanitize your environment. In public places, please keep your social distance and wear your face mask over your nose and your mouth. I see a lot of people wearing the mask as a chin rack, having it under the chin, sometimes around the neck. In Trinidad and Tobago, some COVID restrictions will be relaxed from tomorrow. Places of worship will be allowed to have a 50% congregation for 1 hour only, with each person staying 6 feet apart. And the public service in Trinidad and Tobago will be back to work in full force. It is refreshing to learn that Caribbean Airlines has started operating in a small number of flights from Thursday gone, last Thursday, from Trinidad to New York, with passengers having to transit via Guyana. We know that the police in Suriname has detained a political pollster from Trinidad, Derek Ramsamouj, who reportedly does not have access to an attorney or his family for the past 2 weeks. Ramsamouj is in police custody in Suriname for questioning about a fraud and corruption matter involving the State Bank in Suriname. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center Company Limited, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. We are dedicated to highlighting and discussing issues and events that impact mainly Indo-Caribbean people in the region. We believe that they and their views are often marginal or marginalized in the mainstream media and in formal discourses and in public groups, organizations, and institutions. The topics of these discussions are mainly on or about Indians, but these meetings are not for Indians only. This platform welcomes all, regardless of ethnicity. This forum follows the Black Lives Matter movement with a mission to eradicate inequality, injustice, discrimination, and systemic racism. This forum is international in scope. It seeks to provide voice and visibility to a group that is an ethnic minority in the Caribbean. This meeting would end about 9 p.m. Trinidad time, which means that it's going to run for about an hour and a half. For legal purposes and to avoid lawsuits of slander and defamation, we hereby state that the views expressed by presenters and participants are their own and do not necessarily represent those of ICC. Our moderator tonight is again Sadhana Mohan. We are always delighted to have you from Suriname. Sadhana is a legal advisor specialized in inheritance and estate matters. Sadhana is also a trained Bharatanatyam dance teacher with her own institute called Satrangi, where she conducts classes in Bharatanatyam, Indian folk and film songs, Bollywood, and fusion. Sadhana is also a certified yoga teacher. She is also the co-host of a singers contest in Suriname called Sare Gama Pa. Sadhana, welcome, and please take over from here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahabir. Namaste and good evening to all. Ladies and gentlemen, this public meeting will take the form of a panel discussion. Please put your microphones on mute unless you have to speak, and the microphone icon is symbol on the bottom of your tab or laptop. And because there will be discussions, if someone wants to say something, you can type it in the chat box. Our topic tonight is the Indian community in Barbados, business, religion, and ethnic relation in the land of the flying fish. Barbados is located in the Caribbean near Saint Lucia, St. Vincent, and Martinique. It's 21 miles in length and up to 40 miles in width, covering an area of 176 square miles. The present population of Barbados is about 287,000 persons, just more than 250,000 people. And Barbados is famous about, we know Rihanna, the international singer, songwriter, actress, and designer. She was also born in Barbados. Also, Sir Garfield Sobers, the greatest cricket all-rounder of all time. Honourable Mia Mottley, the first female Prime Minister of Barbados. And Barbados has also produced the oldest rum in the world, formed its Mount Gay Distillery, and there's also a pristine, peaceful beaches. Barbados had a head office of CXC, the Caribbean Examinations Council, which is under attack these days for its grading system. Prime Minister Mottley is also the chair of CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, which played a critical role in restoring democracy to Guyana during the recounting of votes following March 2020 elections. It's now time to bring our first speaker for tonight. He is Sabir Nakhuda. I hope I have pronounced the name good. He is the author of Bengal to Barbados, a 100-year history of East Indians in Barbados, published in 2013, and Muslims in CARICOM countries, published this year in 2020. He was born in Gujarat, India. He went to Barbados at the age of 10 with his parents. Mr. Sabir went to a 7-day advanced school in Barbados and to George Brown College in Canada. His knowledge of Urdu, Hindi, Gujarati, and English helped him to conduct his research around the world. Welcome, Mr. Sabir Nakhuda, and please speak for 10 minutes. Thank you. Sir, you can unmute yourself, please. Yes. Welcome, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. Good night. Namaskar to everyone. I wish to thank Dr. Kumar and the organization for inviting myself and Sulaiman to speak tonight on the Indian of Barbados. As you know, unlike the East Indians in Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, Jamaica, and other Caribbean countries where the East Indians came as indentured laborers, that was not the case in Barbados. East Indians came on their own, and they came accidentally. So the first East Indian who came to Barbados came from a Hooghly district in West Bengal. The village is Jinpur village, Hooghly district in West Bengal. He didn't actually set off to come to Barbados. He decided to go and visit his father-in-law who was living in Trinidad and Tobago. And after a few weeks, he then decided that, let me go to Barbados. So he didn't have any pre-intention to come to Barbados. He came to Barbados and started itinerant trading business. It was a niche market because in those days, as you know, Black Barbadians were working in the cane field, and they could not get a chance to come to Bridgetown and buy their merchandise. And even if they had to come to Bridgetown and buy their merchandise, they had to pay cash for it. So Bashat Ali decided to go into this niche market he would go and credit some of the merchandise from the merchants in Bridgetown. He also came from Trinidad with some clothing, silk and so on. And so he started to catch a bus, sometime walk, and started to give the working people his goods on a credit basis. So it was something, it was an opportunity for the Barbadians who were working in the plantation and around the factory and so on. And so that made it very, very easy for the Barbadians to get their goods, and they don't have to pay the money at one time. It was like on a credit basis. So they would get the goods, and those were basic items that he was selling. You know, somebody wanted a cutlass, or somebody wanted the shoes, or wanted some hat or coat or something like that. So it was basic stuff that he was crediting to the Black Barbadians. And later on, of course, then he decided to call members of his family, his immediate family. And as you know, after your immediate family, you started to call your neighbors, and then people from your villages and so on. So a small Bengali Indian community started to stay in Barbados. Later on, the second batch of East Indians who came were from Gujarat. And these Indians came Bashar Ali came in around 1910, and these Gujarati came in 1929. Again, they did not really set out to come to Barbados. There was an advertising in the newspaper in the village. They wanted someone to cut lumber in Brazil. And so these three people, Hafiz Kasuji, Musa Patel, and Ibrahim Bulbulia, decided to go to Brazil to cut lumber. But by the time they get to French Guiana, they ran out of money. And they then decided to go to Guyana. When they went to Guyana, there were Muslims in Guyana because, as you know, Muslims came there since 1845 as indentured. They were among the indentured laborers who would have come from north of India, Uttar Pradesh, and so on. So then they advised them that, why don't you, go to Barbados and you can make some money by selling coconuts and charcoals. They agreed to do that. So they got a schooner and decided to go to Barbados. So they made their first voyage around 1929 with some coconuts and some coal, because at that time, Barbadians and a lot of the Caribbean islands too, people used to use coal as their cooking method. They came once or twice, and then they met the Bengalis. And of course, they were very, very happy to see people from their own country, India. They went back to Guyana, but then they came back again the third time and decided to make Barbados their home. They found out from the Bengalis what work they were doing. They were going around the countryside, doing the itinerant trading, crediting the Barbadian people, and going on a weekly basis to collect their money. So they'll have a small suitcase. Some of them would catch bus, put the suitcase on their head. Some of them would have a bicycle, and they would put the suitcase in the back of the bicycle, the carrier. So the Gujaratis began to do that. This is the picture of some of them who would have come in the 1930s and 1937. Those were some of the early Gujarati East Indians who would have come to Barbados. Later on, around 1932, there was the first Sindhi migration. And that migration took place by Jeevat Ram. Now, Jeevat Ram was an individual who was asked by his brother-in-law, who had a business in Bermuda, to come and hold on until he go to India and come back. So Jeevat Ram decided to do so. And after his brother-in-law went to India and came back to Bermuda, Jeevat Ram also had maybe $500 in his pocket, and he wanted to do some business. So again, his brother-in-law said, why don't you go to Barbados? And he decided, okay, I go to Barbados. So you had the Bengali who came accidentally. You have the Gujarati East Indians who end up in Barbados accidentally. And then you have Jeewat Ram, a Sindhi. And as you know, prior to the partition of Pakistan, Pakistan was also a part of India at that particular time. And he came from Hyderabad, Sindh. What he did is that he started, unlike the Bengalis and unlike the Gujaratis, he decided to have his shop. So he opened his first dry goods shop. This is the dry goods shop there in Bridgetown, in the middle of Bridgetown. And he would sell clothing and he would sell basic items and so on to the Barbadian people. But one of the nice thing about the East Indians, including the Sindhis too, that even although they had their shops, they would also have a layaway plan. Unlike other merchants in Bridgetown, it was always on cash on delivery, but that was not the situation for Jeewat Ram either. Here we have a Karpalani's in Barbados. Next to it is also a Muslim store. Karpalani's and so on, what they would do to is that when someone is getting married or during Easter time or Christmas time, they would also have a tailor shop at the back of the store. And so they would make clothing, make shirts and make pants and so on for the children and also for adults too. The itinerant traders also would, carry school clothing for the children, shoes. At Christmas time, they would also supply them with curtains and other materials and so on. And this is the bicycle that they would go ride around. And the suitcase at the suitcase at the top, the galvanized suitcase is what they use to come to Barbados. And the suitcase in the front or the one at the back of the bicycle would be the suitcase that they would use to sell their material. And the material would be like 3.5 yards of keiki, 3.5 yards of clothes to make dress and such things like that. And so that is how they started to do their businesses, very, very small businesses. And then later on, they began to have a house and started to, raise but what they would do too, that they would live in a commune. In other words, there would be 5 or 6 of them would be living together to save money because they were kind of a partners in poverty among the Barbadian people too. They were not rich. So the itinerant traders, for example, would collect 25 cents, 50 cents, and so on. And that was the kind of money that they would make at that time. I thought I would let Suleiman start. These 2 pictures, the first one on the left would have to do with the East Indian community getting together with Sir Grantley Adam, who was the first premier of the Federation of the West Indies at that time. And on the right is the Sindhi and the Muslim community getting together because they used to get together very often, maybe, have some Indian meal and things like that. Now, the whole situation has changed. One of the reasons they had to do that too, because they needed each other. And the 2 pictures now that came up, around 1950, Mohammed Rafiq came to Barbados. He was going to Guyana and Trinidad to perform his show. And so he decided to stop over in Barbados and meet the Indian communities, both Muslims and the Sindhis. And I think that they had a reception for him. So you will see the pictures of the men and the ladies surrounding him. I will leave now. The next picture, Suleiman, you have with the masjid, or you're going to do that later. And meet the, right. Well, then of course the Muslims, started to pray in various homes and so on. They would get together and they would perform their own salah in various homes and so on. And after a while, in 1950, they decided to purchase this house. This picture was taken during the Hurricane Jeanette time. And then on the right, you will see that the second mosque came into being in 1957. The first Hindu temple was built around, opened around 1995 in Welches in October 1995. The Sindhis, they would also pray in their homes. And so that's how they had started praying. And later on in 1995, they started to have their first mandir. And now we have one or two mandirs as the Guyanese Indians who would have come here. They would set up their own mandir. So that is what is the situation at present. I would deal with some of those pictures. This is the mandir in Welches, and the building is on the right. But in the mandir, although it was built by the Sindhis, you'll find most of the Guyanese would frequent the mandir. You would hardly see Sindhis Indian coming to the mandir. Most of the Sindhis in Barbados belong to the Sai Baba organization. And so they would have their own place of worship, another place in Bridgetown, but not at this place. Sometime I suppose they get together during the time of Diwali, but even then you would find that at this mandir that we are seeing now, you will find that most of the Caribbean Hindus would attend the puja and different festivals. We can soon have the Dasara and so on. So so that is what they would do. This is the holy time, and all of these Indians are the South Indians. They came in the 1960s after Barbados gained its independence. A lot of them came as professionals, as doctors, to work in our Queen Elizabeth hospitals. They also, many of them, and they come from South India, places like Tamil Nadu, Chennai, and other parts of India. But a lot of them are also Christians. They come from Kerala and so on. And this is where they are celebrating the festival of Holi.
Oh, Satana, you have to unmute your mic. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sabir Nakuda. Thank you very much for the information. Our second speaker for tonight is Haji Suleiman Bulbulia. Haji Suleiman Bulbulia was the secretary of the Barbados Muslim Association and the Muslim chaplain of the University of the West Indies at a Cave Hill campus. He is a graduate in management studies from the same university. Haji Suleiman is also a justice of the peace and the chairman of Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition. He is a columnist, a commentator, and a lecturer on matters relating to Muslim, Islam, and social issues. Please, Haji Bulbulia, the mic is now yours for approx 10, 12 minutes. Yes.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'm very happy to be here, and I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here. And I thank Sabir for bringing me along with him. He's the specialist in this area, and I will try to add something if I can as we go along. So thank you so much, everyone. And to continue from where Sabir started, and I will just share continue to share the PowerPoint that we started, but I need to go back to a bit of the beginning, and we'll do so now. So to understand a bit of the impact that the East Indians had on Barbados, as Sabir mentioned, when the first group or the first wave of East Indians came, and that was out of Bengal, he mentioned that they started the itinerant trade. And that was interesting because it was not something that we have found was practiced here before. And I think we're trying to gather where they got that idea from, if it's something they bought with them or brought with them, or somebody, or they saw it somewhere. But anyway, they started it, and it became a practice, and it became a economic well-being for them. And as Sabir mentioned, when the early Gujarati migrants came, they also entered into that same sort of business arrangement. They actually came from an agricultural background in Gujarat, so it was interesting that they also got into business, and I guess they saw the benefits of it. And that, as Sabir mentioned, so they started out, they came basically with nothing. Most of the early East Indian migrants to Barbados came with not much wealth. They were not well off. They actually came because to better themselves economically and financially, came with very little belongings, and started to practice their trade. And getting involved in this niche market, it meant that they were selling on credit to average Barbadians, lower income usually, and it meant going from house to house. So they would travel with suitcases loaded with items that they perhaps would have either purchased if they could have afford to purchase, or taken on credit from someone else, the other merchants in Bridgetown, taking it out to the countryside and selling it. And in a lot of cases, they started off as walking tradesmen and walking with a suitcase on their head. And we suspect that's perhaps where the word coolie man comes from. So coolie man in Barbados is not a derogatory term. It is actually an affectionate term used for persons who go house to house selling on credit, and it still remains to this day. So you still have the word coolie man being used, and it is not taken in a derogatory sense as it is used in other parts of the world. So we still have that here. But they started out, they eventually moved to bicycles, as is in this picture here. And then they eventually were able to afford a car, a van, a vehicle. So that trade is important because the East Indians built their livelihoods on that trade. And that had a tremendous impact on the Barbadian community, Barbadian economic landscape. And it started back in the early 1900s. And it continued, and it continues until this day. Imagine that you still have that trade continuing, very productive for the families engaged in it, and still continuing. Even though you have all the credit at ports and the other business places, you can get credit from them. Hire purchase is now popular in many places. That remains. And why that remains is because it is seen as a partnership, as Sabir mentioned, between the average Barbadian and the tradesman. And it's basically a handshake. It is no paperwork, no, you have to pull up collateral. They have a card, you put the name on the card, what have you taken, how much you have taken, how much you're going to pay, and they go every week. And one commentator on the whole trade, itinerant trade, said that Barbadians or Bajans and Indians became partners in poverty because they saw it as a buffer between the average Barbadian having the ability to buy goods, and they didn't have that at the time from the white merchant class in Bridgetown. They didn't have that ability. If they had to save money in order to go into Bridgetown and buy what they needed, and that was very, very hard at that time. So what the East Indian was able to come in and do, and mainly the East Indian Muslim from Bengal and Gujarat was the ones that got involved in this trade, they became the buffer. So they were able to offer the goods to the client on credit, and the person would pay weekly. Now, some weeks would come and the person can't pay, and the tradesman would be very lenient with them. They would not become harsh with them. They would go back the next week and so on. So it became a trade, and that impacted a lot on Barbados. And it impacted so much that even many politicians today will tell you of the benefits that accrued to them by not being able to afford many things. And the former Prime Minister of Barbados, he wrote the foreword to Sabir's book, Bengal to Barbados. And in the foreword, he speaks of this. He said, "For many years, I experienced directly the impact this important group made on the village in which I grew up in the parish of St. Philip. I saw these men alleviate the financial distress of many people who lived in Marchfield in St. Philip. They took care of back-to-school requirements for parents who could not afford to buy school uniforms by extending generous credits to them at Christmas. And at Christmas, the poorest households benefited." So we understand that the impact of the early East Indian migrants was through business, through economic ventures like this, and it continues to this day where there's still many Barbadians benefiting from having access to credit on very lenient terms. It didn't go without people speaking against it. You had in the 1937 riots, one of the commissioners coming out and saying, well, these East Indians are affecting white merchant class and they're pauperizing Barbadians and so on. And then you had in the 1960s, the Chamber of Commerce, again, controlled by white merchant class, speaking against the East Indian credit arrangements. But one good thing is that the political establishment of Barbados has always been very open and very free, very good to the East Indian community. And back in 1965, even before we got independence, the Premier of Barbados then, the late Right Honourable Earl Barrow, he said in a conference, when in a press conference, when they had these criticisms, he said, the Indians who journeyed to the country and sold goods to the people were performing a service in this country, which the people appreciated. If this is going on, you cannot say that our people are being robbed. I don't know of any trader who can force anyone to buy something which he does not want to buy. So the East Indian were getting the support of politicians, of government, and so they impacted significantly on Barbados. So that was the economic impact. And as Sabir mentioned, you had stores in Swan Street, both by Muslim and Sindhi businessmen, and that continues to this day, offering credit as well. As the Muslim and Sindhi community grew, you then started to have women coming in, because the first migrants were all men, and then some of them had wives in India, and then they started to bring them over. And you had, here you see a picture of the first Muslim and the first Hindu wedding in Barbados occurring in our country. This is a typical picture that one would think comes out of India, but this is taken in Bridgetown, in the heart of Bridgetown, in area that has a careenage canal, and they have a cow, and the East Indian man is waiting for his wife as she milks the cow. And this picture was captured by a famous Barbadian photographer, Ronnie Carrington, back, I think, Sabir, in the 1980s or 70s. And you see it. So it typically captures what would be an Indian scene, but in Bridgetown, Barbados. And the East Indian community then began to grow and begin to give back to the society in which it lived. So here you have, at 1966, when we have independence, you have the Indian community given the speaker's chair. This chair was made in India, and it was shipped here, and it was donated to the government of Barbados, and it remains the speaker's chair in the House of Parliament in Barbados. And that is a unique gift, a unique thing they're given at the Indian independence. And a couple of years ago, we presented a picture of that presentation to the government, and you see it in the small picture on the left. So the East Indian community then begins to impact not only economically, but in other ways on Barbadian society. Also back in 1966, we have the Muslim Community Welfare Association coming to government and saying, well, we would like to give a gift to the government of Barbados. Errol Barrow, then Premier and becoming Prime Minister, he said, look, we need a cabinet table, a conference table for cabinet meetings. Can you give that? He wants it made of Barbadian mahogany. And it was made and donated in 1967. And it remains to this day the table at which Cabinet of Barbados sits at and makes the decisions for Barbados. That table is there seen in the picture. It's a huge mahogany, Barbados mahogany table. And the little plaque you see there, it's found somewhere under the table. Sabir and I had some trouble finding it when we were going looking for it. And so it is part of East Indians giving back to the Barbadian society, and there we find it there in that thing. And the other small picture is a donation to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital when it was now coming into being. The community got together and gave a donation to that. You also had the Barbados Indian Friendship Society coming about, trying to build linkages between India and Barbados, and use some of the homes that the early East Indians lived in and grew up in, and they remained the same character as any Barbadian home. And then as they grew in wealth and so on, they moved. These are some of the items that have come true, have been brought into Barbados over the years, and Sabir has collected these artifacts and displayed them at various events. One of the impacts of the East Indian community on Barbados culture is the samosa. If that perhaps represents the single most impact of culture and food on Barbadian society. The samosa now is a must-have at any cocktail party whether it's government, NGO, civil society organization, the samosa is the go-to for cocktail parties. So before it was a fish cake in Barbados, now it's a samosa. So the East Indian community have contributed this culinary delight to Barbadian. Rotis, as well as you see in the picture, has also become a standard among dishes in Barbados. So these are some of the East Indian contributions of culture. Mehndi, henna, tattoos, now very, very popular among Barbadians, and you find that here. The game carom board, not very popular, but still practiced by some East Indians. We now have also at our Eid and our Diwali festivals, we have Barbadians getting involved, being invited to, being participating with our community in these festivals as seen in these photos. From a religious perspective, as Sabir mentioned, we have had mosques and we have had mandirs built. This is the largest mosque on the island in the capital city of Bridgetown. The Muslim community is around 3,000. And this is small, started in 1951, and grew over the years and renovated and expanded itself. So this is one of the mosques on the island. This is a Hindu temple that Sabir referred to. Again, the Hindu community also is active on the island and do have their practices mentioned there. Here you have Sabir presenting his book, Bengal to Barbados, to the former Prime Minister in the left-hand corner, and in the right-hand corner, the current Prime Minister, Mia Mottley. And so they have been accorded information on East Indians in Barbados through this research. We have also given it to the University of the West Indies and regionally to Prime Minister Gonzalez of St. Vincent. So we have had a significant impact in terms of that East Indians having a presence in Barbados. This picture that is being shown, these two pictures here, this is a monument that was erected for the 50th anniversary of independence of Barbados. And it was decided that a capsule will be placed within the monument to be reopened in 50 years' time. And Sabir's had the honor of his book being placed in the capsule, Bengal to Barbados. So in that capsule is Bengal to Barbados, which has a history of East Indian and Barbados. And so in 50 years' time, that capsule will be open. Hopefully Sabir and myself and everyone here will still be here to see that capsule being open. And you see the capsule being lowered into its position by a young Muslim female and a young Barbadian young man in the presence of Sir Garfield Sobers and Prince Andrew. He's not in the picture, but Prince Harry, not in the picture, but he's there as well. So these are some of the things that has occurred in Barbados. And we have seen the impact of the East Indian community, and that continues to grow. So thank you for the opportunity, and we will welcome your discussion on this topic.
Thank you very much, Haji Suleiman Bulbulia, also from Barbados. Our final speaker is the discussant, is Dr. Kumar Mahabir of Trinidad and the creator and founder of this online Pan-Caribbean platform. He's an anthropologist. Dr. Mahabir, a former assistant professor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. He obtained his PhD in anthropology from the University of Florida. As a doctoral student, he won a Florida Caribbean Institute Award and an E. Curtis Wilges Fellowship and an Organization of American States Fellowship. Dr. Mahabir is the author of 12 books. Dr. Kumar, please, your 10 minutes are starting now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sadhana Mohan, our moderator. And thank you to those two presenters. I must say, I think this is one of the more informative presentations that we have had running since May month, every Sunday night, Trinidad time. So I can't remember where or how I met Sabir, maybe online, maybe when his book was being posted on the internet, but I made contact with him and eventually I visited him when I went to Barbados to present my argument that Indians were being marginalized in the CXC history and literature syllabus. And Sabir picked me up in the airport and took me home. I spent the night, one night or two, very warm welcome. by he and his wife and family, and he took me all over Barbados. It was a wonderful time. So thank you very much, Sabir. And he did mention Suleiman to me many times when I was there, but it's the first time I'm seeing Suleiman virtually. So the difference between the Indians and Barbados and Indians in Trinidad and Suriname and Guyana, as Sabir has pointed out, is that they didn't go to Barbados as indentured immigrants. They went as merchants, and they had stayed they are there for over 100 years, setting up business in the in Iterant, that's peddling business, and small shops in Bridgetown itself. Um, so I'm doing a great service to the poor Bajan in Barbados. Now, probably if we have time, Sabir and Suleiman would tell us if there is still this trade in coals and coconuts among the Indians, because that's how they started their business there. And also, Sabir noted that they really went to Barbados accidentally, that they were first in Trinidad, then Guyana, and French Guyana, which is interesting. Sabir, you must do some research on that to show the linkage between French Guyana and Barbados, because that's where they went, and Brazil too, where they went to cut lumber. So, and they went by schooner to Barbados because they were seeking opportunities. So, and yes, Sabir did mention that they have introduced new dishes in the national menu. There was always roti, I believe, but they have also introduced the aloo and chana and so on. In the yard of Sabir, where I stayed, he has a Saijan tree. I think he forgot to mention that he introduced Saijan or Moringa to Barbados. One tree that he brought, and he shares it to everybody. And so I guess there are hundreds of Moringa or Saijan trees in Barbados now, introduced by one man, Sabir. I didn't know that Mehendi was so popular. It was a educational lesson there when I saw the images. And of course, I ate the samosa at Sabir's home, and the demand outstripped the supply, because samosa is really, as we have mentioned, really in demand. It's popular among the non-Indians. Now, there have been a couple studies on Indians in Barbados. One I saw it by Natalie Walhurst Jones and Trevor Marshall. It's an academic paper, and it's entitled Migrants to Retail Businessmen, Perspectives on East Indians in Barbados. So both speakers may want to make a comment on that. And then you have your very own researcher doing scholarly work called Hajima Dejia, and the title of her work is Bajan Indians, Emergent Identities of the Gujarati Muslims of Barbados. And we have our very own Trinidadian researcher named Peter Hanuman Singh, who has done an entire chapter in a book, and the title of his work is Beyond Profit and Capital, a study of the Sindhis and Gujaratis of Barbados. So it's a lot of interesting research, and I've been begging Sabir, and Sabir, I hope we could see this dream come alive one day, to have this Indian conference in Barbados after COVID. We're going to have a hybrid conference, face to face. Others would view it online, and we still have that plan to have that Indian diaspora conference in Barbados with mainly Bajan presenters or presenters talking about Indians in Barbados. And also, Sabir, I want to remind you publicly that that dream that you have, I hope it's going to be fulfilled one day, because you did take me around and show me a lot of museums. For a small place, Barbados has a lot of museums, and Sabir wants to set up an Indian museum in Barbados. And he has been collecting artifacts and so on. I think soon he would find some kind of building. Now, in Barbados, the population is 75% Christians, 20% no religion. They claim they don't belong to any religion, and 3% non-Christian. So the Muslims are part of that 3%. Now, in terms of race or ethnicity, there are 91% people of African descent, 4% mixed, and 1% Indian. So I think it might be correct to say that the Muslims are 1% of the population, Indians are about 1% of the population, which is really a tiny group. But from that, it might be a challenge to extrapolate what percentage of Indians or Muslims are intermarrying racially. It's something that you can comment on. And also, if there are cultural performances like we have in Carifesta on a stage, what would be the Muslim contribution to that stage performance? So do you have qasidas being performed publicly? Because culture is to be contributed. You have to contribute, you have to share culture. Do we have, or do you plan to have qasida performances, ghazal, qawwali, and so on, in terms of the performance aspect of culture? Now, also, what are the major differences among the Bengalis, the Gujaratis, and the Sindhis? Because there are three groups that constitute the Indian community there. Now, I noticed both speakers talk a lot about the itinerant peddlers who would go house to house in the countryside with a suitcase and so on. But that's how the Syrian also started in Trinidad, and maybe a lot of places, where they went with a motor car, parked someplace, and walked with a stick for dogs and so on, house to house, in the deep rural recesses of the country. That's how they started, just like you. Now, there's some echo here. And so that's how the Syrians started. But they were called Patik. So I don't know if that word resonates with you, Sabir or Suleiman. That's how they were called. So you mentioned a lot about the Bengalis who migrated from Trinidad and Guyana to Barbados. And at the same time, I recall that popular song by Terry Gajraj, Bengali Babu. So is there a connection? It's a chutney song, which you should hear sometime. It's not obscene and so on, about Bengali Babu coming from Guyana. And the last point I want to make is that now there is some concern about your community, that's the Muslim community in Barbados, by non-Muslims and by non-Indians. And in 2014, I stumbled upon an article in the daily newspaper, and there was concern expressed that you want to set up an exclusive residential community with developers in the Al Nur Muslim, the developers being Al Nur Muslim Association. And it was stated that on that 5-acre plot that you have started construction or acquired, you're going to have residences, and it's situated in a place called St. James, like we have St. James here. And you plan to build a mosque and a community center and 37 housing units, targeting mainly Muslims. And the letter expressed fear and anxiety that you may soon lobby for Sharia law, and that you probably want to propagate anti-Bajan destructive elements in the national character of Barbados. So I'm just reading, we got to give both sides of the story. And so what are your views on this? And it's also stated in that 2014 letter published in the daily newspaper in Barbados that something about forcing the okay. Do you feel pressure to assimilate into the general Bajan community? So these are the points that I have to make here. Let me just run through, and I think that is it. Okay, thank you very much. And I must say, whenever Sabir calls me, he always addresses me as Namaskar, Namaste, and he's as a Muslim, he sends me as a Hindu, me being a Hindu, he sends me a lot of bhajans and so on. And whenever I will with him, the first thing I say when I will with him, that is to build bridges, to build bridges among religions. Thank you very much, Sadhana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar.
Sadhana.
I think it's okay now that the questions you ask, that they can answer those questions first. Shall we first go to Mr. Sabir Nakhuda, please?
Yes, let me first deal with the intermarriage. So when Bengalis first came to Barbados in 1910, of course, they didn't have enough money to call their wives. Most of them were married in India. Because when you bring in 25 cents, customer give you, and sometimes that customer would not give you any money. And maybe in 1910, in my time, in the 1950s, because I came from India to Barbados in 1958, at that time when I would go with my dad doing itinerant trading over the weekends, we used to get 25 cents. And when we get 50 cents and $1, wow, that is the best customer you ever have. And so that therefore then they were unable to call their wives. And majority of those early East Indians who were the West Bengalis, and they were Muslims. And the religion of Islam permits an individual to have more than one wife. And so rather than committing a sin, what they did is that they married to Barbadian women. So 90% of all the early East Indians married to the Barbadian women. But what they did is that they didn't force their wives to become Muslims. They continued to follow their faith. The Barbadian lady continued to follow her Christian beliefs. And the children that were born from those unions, the boys or the girls or the children would then, the mother would take them to church. So there was no objection by the Muslim father why you are taking this child to church. The only no in the house was that you cannot have pork in the house and you cannot have alcohol in the house. So the East Indian Muslims were very, very tolerant to their Barbadian Christian wives. They would worship their own, they would get together on Friday in somebody's house and they would perform their Juma Salah. And then after that, they would sit down and they would eat, their chawal and their dal. They call it dal and bat, and they would talk about their villages and so on. And that intermarriage continued even when the Gujaratis first came to. Some of them would have been married to in India. They would even have children. But here again, they decided to marry to Barbadian women too. So there was no discrimination of not marrying a Barbadian Black woman. Most of the women that they married to were Black Barbadian women. Some of the East Indians also married to what you call the red legs, but in majority, they were Black Barbadian women. And when I spoke to the wives and I spoke to the children and grandchildren of those marriages, the mixed marriages, they spoke so highly of their father, that the father was loving, kind, gentle. And the first madrasa that opened up in 1951 after the mosque, most of the children that went to the first madrasa, which is the Islamic school, were all children from the mixed marriages. And so even today, we have now a situation where in the earlier times we have the male marrying the female Barbadians. Now today, because our children go to school with Barbadians and they have their friends, so you find that Muslim girls are also marrying Barbadian boys today. Actually, we also have some Sindhi girls marrying to Muslim boys. And so for us in Barbados, and as you know, Islam is colorblind. And so we have no problem having this intermarriage. And the relationship has been fantastic. Of course, you would always have each household have their own rules and regulation and so on. But by and large, you will find that those marriages are still standing and they are, you know, we have no problem with that at all. And I want to deal with briefly with, has to do with the An-Nur Masjid. I think that the people blew it out of proportion. We could not get any land to have a masjid in the Cave Hill area. I've been living in Cave Hill area since 1970. And when I had to take my kids to madrasa, we had to go to Kensington. And during the traffic time, like 4 o'clock, you know, after school, you're taking them to madrasa and then you're going back for them, you know, so it was very tedious. Even if you go into mosque, you know, it was very tedious. So we were always looking for area where we could have our own masjid as the community grew around the An-Nur, the Cave Hill area. And eventually we found a place. And the arrangement was that you're supposed to have, you know, but you have to buy all 5 or 6 acres of land. And how can we get, and they gave us a specific time by which we need to purchase that particular land. And it was no time for us to go and advertise because, as you know, you then had to go to a bank and it would take so many months and so on. So we, the members of the Muslim community around that area, and I am one of them, we approached the wider Muslim community. This is the situation, what can be done? And they said, okay, you know, there are those who then decided that, yes, you know, we would pay for it. And there were those who did not wish or they didn't need to come to Cave Hill to have a house because they already had homes and so on. They contributed and bought a plot. So we had 35, 37 plots. And they bought a plot just to help us out so that we can get the permission from town and country planning that we can have our own mosque. Because in residential area, you cannot have a place of worship, not even a church or a mandir or whatever it is. As long as you have this people living around that particular place of worship, then of course it can be possible. And so that is what happened. There is no gated community. The only gate I will see there is the garage door that somebody want to put. So that was all blown out of proportion. Suleiman and I, they had a misinformation. They had a misunderstanding. After that article, Suleiman and I were invited by the radio stations and so on, and we put our position. And after that, we had no problem. One must also remember that the churches, the established churches, the politicians and so on were not part and parcel of that talk about we are going to build a gated community and we're going to have a Sharia and so on. You know, we are law-abiding citizens of this land. Barbados is our home, and we have no problem. We have no reason to have a Sharia. You just don't have Sharia, you know, willy-nilly. Once we practice our basic principles. So those are the 2 points that I would deal with, and I think that Suleiman would deal with others.
Thank you, Sabir. I think one of the other things that you raised was the cultural impact of the East Indians and appearing in programs like Carifesta and so on. The experience with the East Indian, Muslim, and Sindhi communities is a little different here in Barbados as compared to Trinidad and Guyana and Suriname, where there are larger communities and more established cultural events. We don't have as many similar cultural events here, except within our own spaces. And so it's something that perhaps will evolve over time and will be part of the landscape. So for example, like qasidas and so on, competitions and so on, we don't have that here. It is a different experience here among the Muslim community, and the Sindhi community have their own outlets in which they do cultural events. So it's a bit different, but we are seeing a bit of change among the younger generation where they're getting involved in some things, and perhaps it's based on a faith-based background. As Sabir mentioned about the project, he's correct, and most of that negativity to the project came about from a news report that was inaccurate, and it portrayed the wrong impression of the project. So that's what caused it, and a lot of that is found on social media. What we found was that it came on social media. The negative reactions was on social media, not in the day-to-day on the person on the street you meet. It wasn't there. It was on social media by a few people, but it was there. And we did have back in the 1980s some attempt to put focus or spotlight on the East Indian community, because at that time there was a discussion going on in Parliament about the role of East Indians in Barbados and East Indians taking over. And they had a calypso that came out at the time, and it was very anti-Indian, and everywhere they look, they will see an Indian and so on. So it brought a spotlight on the East Indian community in a negative way. And as a result of all that was going on in the 1980s, someone actually threw stones at the mosque in the city, and they spray painted the wall of the mosque. The best Indian is a dead one. And so it opened up obviously our eyes as well to having the need for more interaction with the wider society, our neighbors as well. Because if they saw a mosque as an Indian place of worship, then there's something wrong, there's a disconnect, because it's obviously, as Sabir mentioned before, Islam is for all. So we embarked again on a wider program of education, allowing for Barbadians, wider Barbadian community to understand more about who we are, what our faith is about, and also who we are as an East Indian community. And that helped a lot. It went a long way, and we built bridges over the years on that. There are a couple of questions I'm seeing in the chat here that perhaps fall in. Are East Indians generally better off economically than African Barbados? I think it is a similar experience. So in the Muslim or in the East Indian community, you have a wide range. So you have those who have done very well economically, those who are the middle income, and those who are at the other end who are lower income. And so generally you have that also experience within our community. So we don't have like one. I can't answer that one way in saying that everyone has done well. There's a general across the board, similar to Barbadian community, where you have done those who have done very well and some have not. Racial tensions, as I mentioned, have not really existed except at least few periods of time, and generally Barbadians are very open to the East Indian neighbors and interact freely. One question here that came up to Sabir. I don't know if Sabir wants to answer, or I can go ahead and answer it. Comment on fasting practice in interreligious families. To what extent does non-Muslim members of the family fast for Ramadan? So that fits into a whole discussion on when you find two cultures, two religious groups coming together. So as Sabir mentioned, in the earlier migrants, you had Bengalis and Gujaratis getting married to persons of Christian background, not Muslim, different cultures, and those relationships working very well and growing. What you didn't find after that in the later generations, then you found persons who came from India brought their wives with them, they brought their families with them, or those who were growing up here then got a wife or a spouse or a husband coming in from India as a migrant. So that kind of changed back in the 60s, perhaps late 50s, 60s, 70s. And then, but you also found you still had persons who intermarried. And so in those intermarriage situations with other persons of other cultures and faith, you had then to have find a common ground. So practices like Ramadan, when Ramadan came, you know that the Muslim in the home was fasting, and generally the family would fast together and break fast together. When Eid came, everybody would celebrate. When Christmas came, there will be celebration as well maybe in that family, in the extended family, but minus the alcohol and the ham, kind of pork. You know, maybe they had halal chicken and halal meat. And similarly with other families in the Hindu culture, Sindhi culture, maybe no meat would have occurred. So you've had those things happening. And that is part of the whole building the society. I'm not sure if I missed any other questions.
Thank you so much for both of your information. Dr. Kumar, I hope your questions are answered.
Yeah. Yes.
The floor is now open for questions, comments, and contributions. But due to a bit lack of time, I hope the audiences and the presenters to give a short amount of time for the questions and answers. So we can go to the questions and answers, please.
Okay, Tara Singh, New York. I have a question for Dr. Kumar. I would like to know if any Indians who live in Barbados, whether they were part of the indentureship system. I know most of the Caribbean islands do have segments of the population that are part of the contract indenture system. Can you say if there is any segmented Barbados population that comprise of indentured immigrants?
Well,
and if you have a rough idea of how much.
No, as Sabir has mentioned, who is a historian, he's the authority. I mean, if you Google history of Indians and so on, his name will come up all the time. There were no indentured immigrants to Barbados. They came from a number of countries, mainly Guyana and Trinidad, French Guyana, and other places. They went to Barbados indirectly, not directly from India. However, maybe in the end of this program, Sabir can throw some light on this. I understand the Guyanese migrants have gotten a bad name because of the behavior and so on. So maybe we can talk about that. So yes, so I've answered your question, Tara.
Yes. Namaste, Sitaram, everybody.
Yes, Suridev, yes.
Yes. I am the Public Relations Officer of the National Council of Indian Culture in Trinidad. And my interest is uniting the Indo-Caribbean people. In fact, we have been doing it worldwide, culturally that is. Now, we have done a lot of work in Jamaica and Belize, of course. Kumar, you first introduced me to the Indo-Belizean people, and that's history, the interest in culture. We have never had any link with Barbados, and I have an interest, and I really want to work with the Indo-Bajan community in establishing, cultural exchange, dance tuition, music, and what have you. So if there's an interest, Janab, anybody from in this room chat from Barbados, I got 2 numbers already. I'll be linking up with you, but I have an interest, and I really want to work in Barbados. So we'll be in touch, and Kumar, thanks again for allowing me to.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Are there other
Mansraj
questions?
Ramphal, Trinidad and Tobago. Just want to comment on the indentured Indians. There were no indentured Indians in Barbados. However, there were small numbers in St. Vincent. St. Kitts received 1 ship, and Nevis received 1 ship only. Antigua made a request, but that was denied. So as Dr. Mahabir said, most Indians went to Guyana and to Trinidad. It is very interesting, the early ventures of the Indians who came to Barbados. In fact, it is very similar to the early Portuguese in Guyana, Trinidad, St. Vincent, and so on. That is, they went out as hucksters, peddlers, that is, small merchants, as you said, with their suitcases on their backs and so on, walking from village to village in that hot sun and trading with the Africans who were in the main very poor people. I have a question for Mr. And thank you very much, Haji Suleiman Bulbulia. I hope I pronounced it correctly. We know about bulbul in Trinidad, a musical instrument. I think it also refers to flowers. And Mr. Sabir Nakuda, I hope the information I gave you on the St. Vincent Indians who came on the indentureship directly from India proved of some use. I have not yet gotten a copy of your book, But I want to ask simply, was there a high degree of cooperation between the Bengalis, Gujaratis, and Sindhis in Barbados in the early days? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramphal. Can we have a next question and afterwards the answers on that? Is there another question?
Yes, this is Leon Brunings from Suriname.
Yes.
Dr. Kumar, again, my commendations. This is a very interesting evening. I never knew about Indians in Barbados. I visited many times and I never met one. So I just assumed that there were only mainly blacks in Barbados, but very interesting. And I'm certainly going to look for some more next time I'm going to go to Barbados. I'm not so clear on the number of Indians yet in Barbados. Are you saying that it is around 1 or 2%? So there should be around 3,000 to 6,000 Indians?
Yes, about 3,000. 3,000. 3,000.
Okay. Okay, thank you. But very interesting, Mr. Nakuda and Mr. Bulbilia. I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brunings, for your participation. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, may I ask a question? Hassan, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I missed out like a few minutes, so maybe this was answered already. But the word coolie is a derogative, negative name in Trinidad and Guyana, but I understand in Barbados and Grenada is not so. So can you all enlighten me on that? The word coolie is like a natural.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question here.
Please.
Hemraj, go ahead.
Hi, Hemraj Ramdat, Ottawa, Canada. Always a delight to be on this program, particularly today, principally because I've had the good fortune of living in Barbados for 15 years. And I've had also the pleasure of being introduced with and chat with Nakul. So, I mean, in fact, I was a part of the resource for his book because I was the first Indian to be appointed as the country manager for Shell in Barbados, which is very special. Anyway, I have two questions and one comment. The first question really is always surprised me that Bengalis and Gujaratis who came to Barbados came from an agricultural background, and Barbados is an agricultural society. And I found it rather interesting that they were never involved in agriculture in any way, but in trading versus agricultural production. So that's the first question. And the second question regarding the success. When I lived in Barbados, I found there was not a racial tension, but there was some form of animosity between a lot of folks who were not happy that the Indians particularly were doing good. In fact, they owned most of Swan Street and moving into Main Street. So that was, I think, becoming an irritant to some people. And finally, my comment is for Sursdeo. Sursdeo, many years ago, way back in the 80s, Deo Sharma and Dr. Lachman Kisoon were part and parcel of the link with NCIC to Barbados. Thank you.
Can I have a question?
Yes, Kamini, go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
The location in the economy of the Indians is interesting to me, and I'm wondering. By the way, I'm in Pennsylvania, and I'm a professor of sociology. So it's interesting to me, and I wondered if they were locked out of other means of economic livelihood, as oftentimes we know in Trinidad. I'm originally from Trinidad, that they were, so they found a niche in trade.
Yeah, Jal, yeah.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Jalaluddin Khan from Trinidad and Tobago. I have a question regards to the Bengali community specifically because my father's family is from that community in the Port of Spain area and were also traders. That the link with the Bengali community with Trinidad and Barbados, were there any links historically? That's one. And two, regards to the particular products that were trading, I'm interested if East Indian cloth, specifically that of the pattern cloth, Madras cloth, it was traded within the Barbados community because during the period of African slavery specifically, Madras cloth was an extensive trade where Barbados was the hub for the Caribbean to supply Madras cloth to the Caribbean region as a point of reference coming out from India. And as the trade continued, if the East Indian community also participated in that trade, because now Madras is now adopted, it especially in the Western Caribbean, the Lesser Antilles, as traditional wear within both primarily the Creole society. So that's a question about one, the link with Trinidad and Tobago, and two, regards to the trade of Madras cloth and the culture of Madras cloth within the trade of the Bengali trade community. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. Can the two presenters answer the questions briefly due to it? We don't have as much as time left yet. So can we please have answers on the questions? We will go on with Mr. Shabir and after that, Mr. Bubula.
Okay, we're talking about the Bengalis, the Gujaratis, and the Sindhi communities. In the 50s and so on, or in the 30s when the Sindhis came and Bengalis were here and the Gujaratis were here too. And the Bengalis and the Gujaratis were doing the itinerant trading. Initially, before the Sindhis came, they were buying their goods or crediting from the merchants, the white merchants. But as soon as the Sindhi merchants came and they started to open up their shops, they diverted their attention from buying from the white man and started to buy from their Indian fellow men. And later on, what happened, and Suleiman talked about the discriminatory and the negative attitude of Barbados Chambers of Commerce and others, for this very reason, because they were thriving from the businesses of the itinerant East Indian traders. And so now the East Indian traders are now going to buy from their fellow East Indians, the Sindhi merchants. Then first, that the Sindhis were selling it at a cheaper price. They were giving the Bengalis and the Gujaratis better deal, maybe 30, 60, 90 days to pay. And the Sindhis had their families in Hong Kong and other places where they were bringing their product at a cheaper price. So here the East Indian itinerant traders could have a markup, a substantial markup, cheaper, and then they would be able to pass on that deal to the Barbadian consumers and so on. So there was this animosity, but not within the community itself. By 1937, most of the Bengalis had died away, or some of them had gone back to their villages. Bengalis are the only community in Barbados that never called their wives to Barbados. They married to Barbadian women. So that is the thing that, yes, we have had no problem. Earlier days, there was the intermixing and celebrating different festivals within the Gujaratis and the Sindhi community. But as both community grew, they decided that they didn't need each other as much as they did before, but not because of any animosity. They had their own situation, their own path cut out, and the Gujarati Muslims also had their own too. Within that time too, in the 60s and the early 70s, both Sindhis and the Gujarati Muslims became more religious conscious. And so they decided to pay more attention to their respective faith. And so you will see them, devoting more of their time into their religious worships, religious gathering, and so on. But up to today, I must say that we have no animosity between the two. No Bengalis now. We only have the progeny of the Bengalis between the Gujaratis and the Sindhis. Somebody asked about, I'm just trying to answer whatever I can remember about lockout, whether the moderator had said about the lockout, whether we had to do it because they had no other choice. We had choices. Bashar Ali had a choice, and he chose to do the itinerant trading. Of course, by the way, though, I agree that the Bengalis and the Gujaratis were farmers, and they should have continued farming, but they probably got fed up farming, And I am still of the opinion that had they continued farming, Barbadian Indians would have been the supplier of the bread and basket of Barbados. The money that making now, I think that they would have made even more. They would have had the control of the land of Barbados. But they didn't do so because they were fed up farming in India anyway, and because of certain situation in India. So that is one. The other one has to do with whether it was thrust upon them. No, it was not. Because they started on a small way as itinerant traders, excuse me, then they move into small businesses. And so even today, they are choosing their own businesses. They are small businesses, they are middle income businesses, and they are now branching out into various directions and into various businesses and so on. Our children are now educated in Barbados. Our children are professionals, lawyers, doctors, teachers. Not only from the secular aspect, but from the religious aspect, we have over 150 individual Muslims, male and female, who can memorize the Quran by heart. We have over 150 Islamic scholars, male, over 140 female Islamic scholars. So we are branching out into different fields, economics, law, medicine, and even into, when it comes to technology, our children are becoming lawyers, they are becoming alims and hufaz and so on too. Those will be some of the answers that I would give to some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sabir Nakuda. Can we please go on to Mr. Suleiman Bulbula, and hope the answers can be a little bit shorter. We don't have as much as time left.
Thank you. I will keep them briefly. So one of the questions that came up was on the term coolie or coolie man, and I did mention that in my presentation that what happened was that the early itinerant traders, as they moved around the villages, they moved with the suitcases on their heads. And as you know, we were all part of the British Empire at the time. And so the word coolie probably came from that experience of seeing these East Indian traders. And so it stuck with the Barbadian public that these itinerant traders was a coolie man from that point of view. And it's not, in Barbados, is not used in a derogatory sense. It is actually used in an affectionate manner. So many Barbadian families would actually say, well, I have my own coolie man, meaning that they have their own itinerant trader who comes, sells them products on credit, and will come every week. And that itinerant trader became part of the household. That coolie man, if you want to use that word, became part of the household. They didn't only do economics, but they were become home counselors. They helped raise the children. They were sought for advice, and so many different things happened. And so they became part of the household, and they would go to the funerals of their clients when they passed away. They will be part of the weddings if the children get married. And it's worth a study. I've told the University of the West Indies, some of the professors, that they should get their students to do a study of the full impact of the itinerant trader or the coolie man. That was one. The other thing is a question on if some Barbadians see the economic success of some East Indians as irritated. I guess that happens, and especially when you have economic downturns, you see elements in the society will look to those who have done well and try to point fingers. And I think it means for us doing more work, being more in the society and contributing, giving back to the society as a community. In terms of the Bengalis linked to Trinidad, Sabir could have dealt with this. I will just deal quickly with this. Yes, there is a link between some of the Bengalis in Trinidad. The first Bengali that came to Barbados stopped in Trinidad. I think his father-in-law, Sabir mentioned, was there. So there was some link of the Bengalis in Trinidad to Barbados. I'm not sure about the Madras cloth. I'm not sure if that passed through the itinerant traders, but that's some of the responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will hand it over to Dr. Kumar. Thank you. Dr. Kumar, can you please unmute?
Yes, but before I
Yes.
close, is there any pressing questions from anybody? Because it's going nicely. Any pressing questions? Okay.
Dr. Kumar, can I add something on the agriculture?
Yes, yes.
Quickly.
Albert, you have to unmute. You have to unmute.
I'm on mute, yeah. Quickly on the agriculture, one of the things with Barbados also that I may add is that most of the agricultural lands were controlled by the white planter class. And so I think at that time it may have been difficult to enter into agriculture, even for Black Barbadians at that time. And a lot of it still exists. A lot of the good plantation lands and agricultural lands still are in the control of white Barbadians.
Yeah.
Yes, Albert,
Dr. Kumar, I want to
yeah.
congratulate the two speakers. I'm from Belize, and we have a very similar percent of Indians compared to the rest of the population. And your comment just now was really in order that even if the Indians had wanted to do agriculture, maybe it would have been difficult to get land and own land at that time, because Barbados is not a big country like Guyana and some of the other ones. And so land was a lot more plentiful. And even my Belize, land was never an issue because it was there. But I want to thank both of you. I really learned a lot from you, and there are many comparisons and similarities of what you're going through. And here's an example. I'm married to a Hispanic Mayan Black woman. And that has happened because there's a numbers problem. There were not many. I'll make it funny. We all married cousin and cousin and cousin, and afterwards we went outside. That's my comment. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Albert. Always nice to have you.
Thank
so
you.
Thank you very much, Sadhana Mohan from Suriname, for being an excellent moderator once again. We hope to have you once you are free and available.
Thank you very much.
all
It was
for
a
taking the
great
time.
pleasure. And
Thank
I've
you.
learned a
I know
lot.
you had
I've
some.
learned a lot tonight. Yes.
Yes, it was a nice program tonight. I like it.
Yeah.
So thank you all for taking the time to participate. Thanks especially to the presenters. I have your contacts, so those people who are interested in getting to know you better and contribute to the culture in Barbados and even visiting Barbados, I'll pass those contacts to them. Thanks to the advisory and planning team. This is a team effort directed by people in the Indian diaspora, Dr. Beturam Ramharak and Vishnu Bisram from New York, Brian Rampal from California, who is here in this virtual room, Tiff Rajkumar from Canada, Ravi Dev from Guyana, Sat Sukhdev, who is here from Trinidad, Leon Brunnings from Suriname, who is always helpful, and many, many others. And we must not forget our IT tech guy behind the scene, Dinesh Maharaj. As I've said before, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center Company Limited. So feel free to contact us if you have books to publish, magazines, and reports. This meeting is held every Sunday night around this time on a variety of topics. Please feel free to suggest a topic for discussion. You can also wish to organize an entire panel, or you may want to offer yourself as a presenter or discussant on a panel. This platform is ours, just as it is yours. So feel free to contact us anytime and give us your email address and WhatsApp number. So we are going to continue building our database. Now, our tentative topic for next Sunday at this time is the Irie Theatre Productions of Trinidad. Selected scenes from plays with discussions. So we had film screening before. This time we are going to have plays, excerpts of plays, of course, videotape, and discussions on this theater production company. And for the first time, we are going to have 2 meetings this coming week. A special Zoom public meeting on Friday, same time, on the topic, the US presidential election, implications for India and the Indian diaspora. So we got a little mixed up with the title. Sorry, I apologize. Those of you who logged in and saw this title, it's because we are doing a lot of things. So Friday night, same time, the US presidential election, implications for India and the Indian diaspora. And our regular Sunday program will be on this theater company and all of their productions. So we would send you an invitation, but in case we have overlooked the opportunity to invite you, you can go direct to our Facebook page on the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center Company Limited. There are many people who are looking at us who are not in the virtual room. They are accessing us and they are looking at us and seeing and hearing and everything through our Facebook page. If you go to our Facebook page, then to access this program, you don't need a Zoom link, you don't need a user ID or user password. You can also view this program on your phone. Ladies and gentlemen, be safe and enjoy the rest of the day or night, depending on your time zone. Bye and take care until next Friday and Sunday also. 2 programs next week. And same time, same virtual space. Bye-bye and may God bless you all.